Let's try to come.
Hey folks, thanks for listening. This is a podcast about Catholic things. I am Eric, the ambassador of common sense.
And I'm Dan, the ambassador of nonsense.
And today we're going to, I'm afraid that this is going to be like a 2-hour podcast.
You know what? Let's just get through it. I mean, if it's a long one, it's a long one. That's the nice thing about podcasts. It's not like the old broadcast radio. If it's long, you go ahead and pause it when you get to work, and after work, start listening and pick up the rest of it.
Right. Okay, so a couple things I wanted to mention. One of them is we talk about things like that video I think we talked about from Planned Parenthood last week, and some of the terrible things in the abortion industry and the bad things people do. But when someone does the opposite, I think it'd be good to give them a shout out. So here's a shout out to General Mills and Cheerios for
check out the Cheerios commercial.
We will link to it on the website. I would play it, but it's pretty much it's all visual.
It's all visual, yeah. I mean, there's music, but it's really a visual commercial.
It's incredibly, I call it pro-life, at least pro-baby.
Whether they intend it to be or not, yeah, who knows? But,
I love the commercial.
It's really neat.
So we always buy generic stuff. We never buy name brand, but when it comes to Cheerios, we buy Cheerios.
Yeah.
So buy more Cheerios and have more babies.
Right. That's right.
Okay. Secondly, let's see. I don't know. I heard this podcast from, and we'll link to this on the website, from Dr. Taylor Marshall. And they brought something up on a podcast that I listened to the other week that we had kind of touched on, and that is the whole idea with the bishops talking about and going on and on about immigration, which I always thought was kind of odd, because we grew up in a pro-life movement that was mostly run by Protestants, and it really bothered me, the fact that the bishops wouldn't even comment on it. The bishops, it just bugged me, because it's like our parents are going to jail for protesting abortion, and the Archbishop of Cincinnati couldn't even talk about it, not even a comment.
They seemed silent. I mean, they might grudgingly, it felt like anything that they did do was grudging, and they didn't, their hearts weren't in addressing it as an issue.
Yeah, fine, all right, abortion is wrong. Yeah, okay.
The biggest, when they did talk about it, often it was in a broader context that they would just use this kind of amorphous life issues term.
Like the seamless garment and
the seamless garment theory and all that. I mean, they would insist on linking it in, for example, with the death penalty or with nuclear proliferation and other stupid stuff like that.
So, where was I? Why did I? Oh, okay. The bishops, but they do want to keep talking about immigration for some reason, which seems kind of odd. And then I listened to this podcast. Now, this guy, his podcast is a lot different from ours, because we allude to these scandals a lot, and we kind of mention them in passing, but we don't really talk about them. And he really talks about it, and he goes after the information and talks about it in a much deeper sense than we do. I cannot do that because it depresses me. But if you want to know more about the scandals and why they're happening, and I didn't hear his podcast until after we did ours about the Pennsylvania scandal, and I guess we're pretty much right in line here with each other, because everything that you said, he more or less addressed.
No kidding.
And so that's why I trust him on this statistic. It looks like the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops receives 30 to 40% of its annual budget from the U.S. government, from U.S. taxpayers, in the forms of grants and whatever. And most of that money is coming from an immigration issue. They get paid per head of refugees that they take in and find homes for. So,
yeah.
Well,
wow.
Here's the clip that addresses it.
In 2013, the bishops received $73 million for the government. That came out to 32% of their budget. So 1/3 of the money in the pocket of the USCCB comes from Uncle Sam. You didn't know that when you were paying your taxes, you were also helping 1/3 of the budget of USCCB. 2014, they received $79 million. 2015, they received $80 million from the U.S. government. 2016, they received a big increase, $95 million from Uncle Sam in 1 year. That's 39% of their total budget. So their total budget is more and more dependent on the U.S. government. How are they getting this money, Timothy? Primarily through migrant and refugee services.
Wow.
Immigration.
Wow, that is something. That is something, though.
Yeah, it's...
and I honestly, I had no idea. It seemed weird that the bishops would be so, I guess, blind to both the pragmatic and some of the, the more realistic issues of immigration, like the reality that illegal immigration is often associated with things like human trafficking and that kind of stuff.
Right.
And, I guess this does make it, make a little bit more sense. I mean,
definitely.
The money motive is always there.
It's sad that we're even having this discussion, but it is what it is. And, again, I'm not gonna dwell on it too much because, we wanted to talk about something else.
Right.
And what we're talking about is, when you come on dark times, the way I put it to you, Danny, is how to deal with dark times, but that's not really, what this is about. It's more how to think about dark times and why bad things happen.
Okay.
A lot.
All right. That's a good. Now, when you say dark times, are you talking about personal dark times or like societal dark times?
I'm talking about personal tragedies.
Okay.
Like,
okay. Right.
Because bad things happen and you feel miserable. And the thing is, when everything is good, we're supposed to thank God. And when everything is bad, to me, well, if you're going to thank God for good, then you've got to blame God for bad. In a sense.
Or, but there is, cause in, Job's response, right? He says, we accept good things from God. Should we not also accept evil? And he maintained that serenity in those times of tragedy.
The fact is, God could keep it from happening.
Yeah.
And he doesn't. He chooses not to. So, when I say blame, I'm thinking more of the mental exercise of, God, you're letting this happen, and maybe there's a reason, maybe not, but in your head, you're still thinking of it as God's fault. Although, probably 80% of the time when bad things happen, it's our own fault.
Right.
I mean, we dig ourselves in these little holes where it's like, I can't get out unless God helps me out.
That's true. But there are those that are not. I mean, there are, loved one who, you've become maybe emotionally dependent on in some way, you find out has some advanced stage of cancer or something.
Right.
Things do, or sudden things, a car crash or something.
Or natural disasters.
Right, right, exactly.
Okay. So, I'm going to start out with a story, and I'm going to try to make it as short as I can, but it's kind of a long story. And,
it's okay.
Danny, you know some of this. I don't know how much of it you know, but, we'll talk about, we'll call them Mary and Jeff, who are married.
Okay. Yep.
And they have several kids, and they're Catholic, but they're not like saints or anything. They're normal people. And Mary, which this is a common story, has some kind of, medical problem, and the doctor gives her Vicodin.
Mm-hmm.
So it starts off, as a treatment for pain. Mm-hmm. And within, say, a couple months, she's taking Vicodin that was not prescribed to her. And now she's buying it on the street, eventually buying Percocet, and then even morphine, and getting kind of whatever she could find. She did draw the line at heroin. She did not get on heroin. But, Jeff is working 2 jobs, and every dime they make is being spent on drugs.
Mm-hmm. So,
eventually she realizes that she has a problem, and so she goes to the doctor. Now, when you admit to a doctor that you're having a drug problem, it's kind of a big deal because you're marked after that. And I don't care if you've got a broken arm or whatever, you're not getting pain meds.
I see.
Because people will break their own bones in order to get pain medication.
Wow.
And so to go to the doctor is a big deal. But what the doctor does is put her on methadone, which is synthetic heroin. I personally think people would be better off going to a heroin clinic instead of a methadone clinic, because methadone, and I'm sure some people in the audience know someone who's on methadone. It makes you crazy, and it turns you into a zombie, and your whole life is still about the drug.
Mm-hmm.
Even though you're not, quote, abusing it, your entire world revolves around getting that drug every day. And it's not like getting prescribed pain meds where they say, all right, every 30 days you get this refill. You have to go to a methadone clinic, and they give you that day's worth, period.
Every day. Wow.
And then,
so doctors actually prescribe this for patients?
Yeah, in order to get out of an opiate addiction.
And is the methadone itself addicting?
Even worse than heroin.
Yeah, that
like you can't just stop. It will kill you.
So you replace one addiction for another addiction.
Only now, this other addiction at least it's being monitored.
Right, and managed, and requiring you to go to this place every single day for your daily dose.
That's kind of how it works. After you've built up some trust, because they do spot checks and drug tests, if you've built up trust, they will start giving it to you, say, 3 days in advance, and then maybe a week in advance. I don't know how far in advance they'll
wait
go.
A minute, how does the end game work in this scenario?
There is no end game.
You mean it's like you're on a managed addiction for the rest of your life? There's no drawdown, no intention to...
It's possible that some people will get off it, but you got to remember, Mary still has this medical problem that requires pain medication. So in her case, there is no end game. It's just, this is what you're going to be on the rest of your life.
So is the methadone a pain drug as well?
Yeah, it is.
Okay. All right. It replaces the other pain drugs, but the controlling of it is, it allows you to only get as much as you're supposed to have so that hopefully you don't abuse it. But it sounds like it doesn't leave you very functional in the meantime.
And in her case, she's a little bit of a OCD, and it made that 100 times worse. And and I mean, there's like 100 examples of how it basically made the family life hell for everyone. But one of the most typical is she didn't want to go in the middle of the day to this pain clinic to get her meds. She felt like she had to be there when they open. Which a lot of druggies do that. So you'll get there at, say, 5 in the morning, an hour before they open, and there's some who have been there all night.
Wow.
Because they're waiting, because they're dope sick and they need something. But she would get there at it got to the point where she would get there at midnight, but she had to bring the kids with her because they were too young to leave alone. So in the middle of the night, she goes to one of the worst areas in town and sits outside in the car at midnight. Okay, everybody's going to sleep in the car so that mom can get her daily dose. It was just bad for everyone. Yeah. And then one day, out of the blue, she says, I have to get off this. And there's nothing external that made her say this. It was just the feeling that you have to get off this. So she went to the doctor. The doctor said, okay, well, looking at a month or two. And she says, no, we're looking at a week or two. And he says, no, you can't do that. And she finally got him to agree to a certain, within schedule. 2 weeks. Yeah, I think 2 weeks was the time they were going to give her. And
so the doctor's concern was that if she draws down too fast, it's physically damaging.
Right.
Because of how potently addictive this methadone is.
Right.
Okay.
And so they went through the 2-week period, and she went through hell, and it was probably a good month before she was free of being dope sick. But she got off it. Out of the blue, this feeling came to her that she had to do it, so she did it. Yeah. And, I would see those, for the following 2 months, I would see her and her husband together. I have never seen that man happier in my life. And, I mean, there's a word for that, the pink cloud, is those, when you get over an addiction for the first couple months, you're suddenly happy to be alive, and your world isn't about drugs anymore. And it goes away, but, for a couple months, it's really a good feeling, and, it wasn't just for her, but for her husband and her kids as well. So, 2 months later, daughter's sick, takes her to the doctor. Doctor's kind of like, she's probably just sick, but Mary's not convinced. Right. And she's getting pushy the way mothers will.
Yeah.
And she's pushing and pushing until finally they run some tests and say, whoops, she's got leukemia.
Yeah.
And it's kind of advanced, but we still might be able to beat this. So, for the next 2 years, they practically live at the hospital.
Right.
And he still has to work 2 jobs. Now more than ever, because he can't lose that insurance.
Right.
And you can imagine taking your family and suddenly, now and they've still got young children. So
yeah, there's other kids too in this family.
And
the daughter's not the only one.
But everybody is all about this now, and I guess it was hell for him again.
Mm-hmm.
After getting off methadone and everything's calmed down, suddenly it's a whole different kind of hell.
Right. Right.
I guess my point in telling you all that is that you can see the hand of God in getting her off the methadone.
Right, right.
Because,
it's almost like God, or, maybe even working through her guardian angel, but it's almost like God prompted her to make this decision and to follow through with it. I mean, because, it had to take grace to follow through with that
grace.
and suffer through that initial withdrawal, just so that she would be prepared for this next tragedy that's going to hit.
Yeah. And I guess if you're in a situation like that, you could say, okay, you got me off the methadone so that I could deal. Why didn't you just maybe get me off the methadone and not have cancer?
Right.
Wouldn't that have been better?
Right.
I mean,
yeah.
If you can see God warning someone or preparing someone for something, then why not just go all the way and make this terrible thing not happen?
Mm-hmm. And how can you help? I mean, in Mary's position here, how can you help not feeling that way deeply about the situation?
Yeah, I mean, you would have to. You'd have to blame God in that situation. In your head,
right.
The misery they were in, I think, did nothing for them. At the same time, there were several fundraisers, and the entire church that they attended came together for things like spaghetti dinners and just donated all the money to them. The entire, there was a walkathon. The entire city that they lived in, this small piece of a city anyway, a neighborhood more like, got involved and raised a bunch of money that way. And then of course there's the fact that, again, they're not like saints. They're just regular people who, they happen to be Catholic and they try to live their faith. They're not perfect at it, but see, I think you would have a much harder time living your faith with all that bad happening.
Yeah.
But they did continue to live their faith, and they continue to just try generally to be good, caring people. And Jeff, the husband, probably one of the nicest guys I know. I never see him mean to people.
Right.
And as much as he's got on his plate, I don't know. I think I would fold up and, I don't know. I would have a mental breakdown. I wouldn't have been able to go through everything he went through over the past 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
And he seems to not only have gone through it, it didn't make him,
bitter in any way or anything like that. No, right.
He's one of those people, if you're having a bad day and you get a chance to talk to him, your day's a little bit better now.
Mm-hmm.
He just makes you feel good about things. And I'm not that way at all. I'm kind of the opposite. Like, if you're having a good day and you talk to me, you're going to feel a little bit worse about life when we're done. I'm just a pessimist. And he's not an optimist necessarily. It's just his general personality is to, the way his demeanor and everything just makes you feel good. And I guess my point here is that I don't think they'll ever look at those, I would say all of this happened in a span of 10 years. And I don't think they'll ever look at that time and think, and be able to say good came from this.
Yeah. Yeah, at least not any recognizable good that they're going to point to in this, you know, in any kind of worldly sense.
Right.
Right.
And I guess it's one of those deals where if you are a source of light for people, you don't really see the light yourself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and
that's a good point.
All the people that they don't know that they helped just by their example, it is possibly the only reason they went through that.
To help those other people.
And I think when we go through dark times, we're always looking for reasons. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times we never find reasons, even though the reasons are there.
Right, because it's not necessarily the reasons that we like to think about. We suffer some kind of tragedy. But, there must be a reason. And what do we actually mean by that? We mean something very selfish. We mean, the universe owes me back for this, or God owes me back for this. What's the payoff?
And I'm going to benefit somehow in the end.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Or they, it's a test. I never really accepted those answers that the test is, I don't know. I mean,
no. Exactly.
I guess God does test you. I know that, but.
Well, yeah, I mean, he allows you to be tested.
Yeah. Even with Job, he didn't test him. He allowed Satan to test him.
And the thing is, he never told Job what was going on. He never gave Job the cosmic behind the scenes explanation. He said, "Who are you to ask me why this is happening?"
Yeah.
He chided Job for even asking.
So I guess, you know what? That took less time than I thought it would. But that's really my only point, is sometimes there is no reason in these really dark times, and all I can say is you gotta decide if you're gonna be a light to other people or not. If you are a light to other people, there can be some reasoning behind it, or there can be some good coming out of it. If you don't stay lit, then it's just tragedy, and that's all it's ever going to be.
Mm-hmm.
And you might not always know, because again, they look back on those years and they see it as tragic, and they probably don't see much more than that.
Right.
But to this day, when bad things happen to me, I'll get into that selfish mode where I'm saying poor me. But eventually I will catch myself, and usually I'm looking at someone else's situation and thinking I'm being kind of petty here. At least I'm not Jeff.
Yeah.
And I say that a lot, and I don't. It actually does help me to not be so bitter to the people around me, and that's all I got.
Well, that's I didn't even know you were going to go in that direction with it, with the topic, but
yeah.
So I'm going to cut for a minute here. This next part you might want to delete anyway, because I'm going to put you on the spot.
Okay.
But so, have you personally gone through some really dark times where you're in a bad mental state and you need something more than just your own sense of perseverance to get through? And the reason I'm asking is because I've never been in that kind of state myself. I have lived what I feel is I don't know what you could call it, a fairly protected life, and maybe it's because internally I'm maybe my guardian angel or God, whoever, realizes that I'm actually maybe pretty weak internally, and so maybe couldn't handle some of the pressures that other people have had to go through, like Jeff.
Yeah.
So I've never had to deal with, if somebody was saying, "Man, I'm having some real trouble. I'm trying to figure out, is it worth it? Why should I even keep going on? Why shouldn't I just end it all?" They get to that state of darkness. I don't have advice for people because I've never been there.
I I have been there, but the things that took me there were, that's why I say, that people like Jeff are a light for other people, because when I think about the hard times that brought me to that point where I start to question my belief in God and whether or not I want to continue as a believer, or maybe just end everything for real with a bunch of pills or something. When I think of what brought me to that point, it's so much less than what other people have had to go through. But I have felt that way.
So your experience, your own, the really dark, when I say dark in this sense, I mean, the temptation to sort of turn to total darkness, the few experiences you might have had, in retrospect, now that you think of them, seem like they're maybe
Mouse,
rather petty compared to things that other people have simply endured.
Yeah, and when I got to the point where I had to really make the decision to not end things, when I got to the point where I wanted to turn from God because I thought God was giving me too much. I always thought about something that had nothing to do with hardship. It was when Jesus was talking about the Eucharist and telling people that they were going to eat his body, and everybody left. And he turned to the apostles and says, "Are you going to leave too?" And their response is, "Where would we go?"
Oh, right.
I kind of always came to that back because it's all right. Let's say I reject God. Well what else is there?
Yeah, that's true. That's you get to that place of where that's where everything that you do is lived out, is in that context of being surrounded by God. Well, if you reject that, what's left?
There's nothing
left. How could
left.
you? Right.
I mean, absolutely nothing. If I don't have that, then it is suicide.
Yeah. And, in fact, I guess that's maybe also an important thing, for anybody, who's, got families and starting to raise young children and so on and so forth, to try to develop just within your households and in your families that sense of the omnipresence of God that creates just the knowledge of God being there, as a certain knowledge, not a speculative belief, not as a thing that, oh yeah, some people believe this, some people believe that, here's what we believe, but as a reality, and to enculturate that in children growing up so that that's the one thing that they can always depend on and lean on and belong to.
Right. Yeah, I think that's important, because if you don't have that, if God is just a theory, well, again, I don't see how some people survive with that.
Right.
Because I don't care who you are, you have problems.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't have God at the end of this, then, I mean, people do commit suicide, and people kill themselves, and people go on suicide bombing missions. But I think that's where it leads. Yeah. Without God. All right.
Okay. Well, that's a good
current
discussion
events
of the topic, right? So gosh, a lot of stuff in the last week here. Within the church.
Yeah.
So the bishops had the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops had their meeting. One of the big topics of the meeting was going to be that they were going to come up with a new set of rules and standards and procedures and policies and so forth for dealing with accusations of misconduct, specifically against bishops.
Yeah.
So, back in what was it, 2002, they did their big meeting in Dallas. They came out with the Dallas Accords or whatever they called it. And it had to do with, how to process accusations and complaints within the church, primarily those directed at priests, and how the bishops would handle them in a way that acknowledged the reality of the possibility that, that the victims are real victims and something bad is going on, but at the same time, protecting the good image of the priest in cases that, where they may be just, kind of like malicious accusations with no foundation and stuff like that. I mean, and those kinds of things do happen. But as it turns out, and as people have learned over the last year, basically, that they only addressed part of the problem, because those didn't involve any procedures for how to handle wrongdoing by the bishops themselves. And so you've got the bishops investigating the bishops.
It's a big nothing burger.
Yeah, right. So so now, presumably they were going to propose these, and then kind of at the 11th hour. So just to give people context, what would have happened is they would have come up with a resolution that said, okay, here's how we would handle these things internally. The resolution that they were talking about, the kind of the main cohesion that was coming together was going to involve boards of Catholic lay people who would perform an initial investigation of certain kinds of allegations, and who would review them and come up with a determination of credibility, and then forward those on to somebody who could take it to the papal nuncio of, whatever. Yeah. But the thing is this plan, once they had put it together, and then as a body, they would vote on it, and then they would send it to the Vatican, and the Vatican would review it, and the Vatican would decide, oh, hey, yeah, this is a good plan, we approve it, go ahead and go forward with it, or no, it's got these problems, you need to address these. At the 11th hour, the Vatican instructed the Conference of Bishops in America to not even vote on a resolution.
Right. Pope Francis specifically.
Pope Francis specifically. Even though the resolution from the vote, it would have gone straight to the Vatican for review, Pope Francis said, don't even vote on it.
Yeah.
So that was puzzling for a lot of people. Now, I think it's a little bit less puzzling now because it has since come out. So the main proposition was going to be one that involved a lay board. And, that has some concerns if you think of lay people as opening it up to just kind of all kinds of modern social experts who may be in favor of various, the ongoing attacks against the church's teaching, say, on sexuality or something like that. But that really wasn't the intention. The intention was that these are lay people who are really involved with the church. Probably a lot of them would have degrees from Catholic universities. This Dr. Taylor Marshall would be an example of somebody who could be on such a board.
Yeah.
So it that was kind of the one plan. Well, so what happened with, kind of alongside the Vatican's 11th hour, don't vote on that command, we also have a counter proposal being brought in by this, who is a cardinal? Is he a cardinal? Cupich? Same guy. He's the same guy who, in responding to some of these allegations against, the Pope regarding, what he knew or didn't know about McCarrick and stuff, he's the same guy that said, hey, we don't have time to keep talking about this. We've got to get on to talking about the environment and important stuff like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay? So this is that guy. Okay? So that guy brings this counter proposal, and this counter proposal, and this is, we should actually take a moment and explain this, because I think a lot of even Catholics, even very involved Catholics, maybe don't understand this. So everybody knows that the church, the Roman rite of the church is divided into geographical areas known as dioceses. And each diocese has a bishop who is the head of that diocese. I mean, it's in terms of juridical authority, it pretty much goes from the bishop to the Vatican. You know, within the diocese to the bishop to the Vatican. Now, in terms of certain maybe administrative aspects, very, very weak on the juridical aspects, but there is a reality, a idea of what's called a metropolitan bishop. And the way it works is this: and it's kind of this way all over the world, but it's easy to talk about it within the United States, because in the United States, most of the time, one of the areas covered by a metropolitan diocese is either the whole state that diocese is in. It's really an archdiocese, and this is really what an archdiocese is. It's not just a diocese of a big city, but it's a metropolitan diocese. So it covers usually the state that diocese is in, sometimes just a large part of the state. Sometimes it can cover multiple states, especially in the smaller New England states and so forth. Yeah. But what it is that, for example, Indiana itself, I think, has 4, I can't remember if it's 3 or 4, but separate dioceses. It's got Fort Wayne, it's got Indianapolis, of course. It's there's one down in Evansville, and and a couple of, I think maybe it's got 5 dioceses. But the whole state of Indiana is one metropolitan area covered by, I think, the Archdiocese of Indianapolis. Okay. So Indianapolis, that bishop of Indianapolis is the archbishop because he's also the bishop over the entire metropolitan area, which is defined by the state of Indiana.
So does he have authority over the other bishops?
Not really. Okay. Like I said, it's more a kind of administrative thing. It's
possibly a money flow thing.
I don't know if it's even a money flow thing. It's and I'll get into that a little bit. So his authority is defined in canon law, and these other dioceses that are part of his metropolitan area but are not part of his archdiocese, like I think the Diocese of Fort Wayne, the Diocese of Evansville, and so forth, are what are called suffragan dioceses in relation to the Archdiocese of Indianapolis. Okay. So you've got the Archbishop, and then the bishops of the diocese that are part of his metropolitan area are called suffragan bishops, Suffragan, in case anybody wants to go look up what that means.
Okay.
So this counter proposal by Cupich that was brought has this idea that if some kind of accusation is made against one of the bishops, if he is a suffragan bishop, it would be investigated and disposed by competent authorities under the office of the archbishop. And if it's brought against the archbishop himself, then it would be the suffragan bishops who put together and constitute a competent investigative authority to look into those accusations.
Okay.
So it was still basically it said, okay, rather than letting lay people. What's that?
It wasn't very strong.
Well, here's the thing. It was less strong in the sense that it said, okay, instead of letting lay people actually come in and look into this stuff, let's still keep it within the bishops. We'll just allow some bishops, we'll trade off which bishop investigates according to who's being accused.
Yeah.
So that's the one thing. The other thing, though, is this. In order to do this, because the roles and the authorities of the metropolitan bishop with regards to the suffragan bishops in the nearby diocese is defined in canon law, they can't just do this. It's not because it requires an acknowledgement and a enforcement of juridical authorities that are now going to be different of bishops against each other or over each other in, across diocese bounds.
So it has to have the approval of the Vatican to change something like that.
Not only approval of the Vatican, it requires rewriting part of canon law.
I see. So it almost require a whole, I hate this. I get stuck on words sometimes.
Like a restructuring of the authority. So, it would require a big meeting. Yeah, like a synod.
Not even a synod, but
like a Vatican meeting, like a council, a council of bishops or something.
Might even require a council meeting.
Well, and that's the point, because where the first plan with the lay boards could be implemented within the United States by each bishop within his diocese according to a plan that's agreed to by all the bishops. And as a plan, it would only affect the United States. The Cupich plan would affect the entire world because it would involve redefining the authorities of metropolitan bishops, and in some sense represent a little bit of an increase of power. You can think of it as a power grab by metropolitan bishops.
Right.
So here's the thing. This 11th hour command by Pope Francis not to vote on any plan corresponded with this release of this proposal by Cupich, which was also worked on by Whirl of D.C. And here's the other thing. It has since come out that these two had delivered their plan and had been discussing their plan with Vatican officials for weeks prior to this meeting. So it just looks a little bit schemish. For the Pope at having had this in hand to then go to the USCCB and say, "Hey, wait a minute, guys, don't vote on anything." So I'm, that's it. It just seems to me like people should be scratching their heads about that. Right. It's what'll come of it eventually. Who knows? I mean, if there really is a change of canon law, then that is the law of the church. Whatever comes out of that, the church continues to be guided by the Holy Spirit and at least protected from teaching error by the Holy Spirit. None of that's going to change. But it kind of shows that, we think of, we have come to think of the church as being largely this, sort of, kind of a well-honed machinery. It's moving along. It does its things. Individual bishops are, we've talked about how weak they seem to be when it comes to actually proclaiming the truth of those teachings that are really needed in today's world, and so on and so forth. But I think this movement is showing us that there is, some politics involved within the church that are every bit as dramatic as some of the politics that you might read about from the Middle Ages.
Yeah. It's kind of, we went there with Pope John Paul II during his reign. I remember reading some of the church history and thinking we're living in kind of a boring time right now. Mm-hmm. And I think during that time, things were just kind of bubbling. And it wasn't boring. It was just, it hadn't been noticed yet.
Right. And of course, it would be nice if it had really just been boring, because it's a Chinese curse made you live in interesting times.
Yeah.
So they've done that. They were told by the Vatican, you can't vote on any kind of policy to address misbehaviors of bishops, especially related to sexual abuse. It's kind of,
I thought he asked them to do it as opposed to told them to do it.
No, he commanded them. Right, he ordered them not to do it.
So it was an order.
Yeah, and it was out of obedience that they had to not actually. But they could take like a non-binding vote just to see where everybody stands and that kind of stuff. But they couldn't actually produce a resolution. Huh. So then there was this other resolution that was not a new, set of procedures. It was just a resolution to send to the Vatican to say, hey, this whole McCarrick thing, you've taken it on yourselves to do a documentary investigation. We haven't heard anything from that. And I know you told us that you would, tell us when you were finished, but this is just a resolution saying we're still here. We're still interested. We want to know as soon as you have anything. We'd like to, start moving towards, some understanding of this and where, where it might lead in terms of how we can help, build a better church with ourselves.
Right.
Well, that was, voted down. Bishops, I don't know whether, they were afraid, that it would sound too accusatorial towards the Vatican, or whether there were certain bishops who maybe, if the Vatican's doing a true, thorough documentary investigation, of everything about who knew what when, maybe there are certain bishops out there who are, really dreading this investigation's conclusions.
2/3 of them,
out,
from what I hear.
Yeah, who knows? I mean, so there's that. So, they could have shown a little bit of, of spine and actually passed this resolution and said, yeah, we really do want to know about this. We need to cleanse ourselves of bishops like McCarrick, and to do that, we need to cleanse ourselves of the kinds of things that allowed McCarrick to keep operating the way he did all this time. And
that's not going to happen.
So they didn't want that. However, they did the one safe thing that they could do, and they passed a resolution, a pastoral letter is what it really was that they approved on racism, saying, "Hey, racism's bad."
Wow,
imagine
that's
that.
News.
That's
because none of us knew that.
Yeah, exactly. It's really, guys. So, apparently, now it's official. The American bishops say, hey, racism is, unacceptable. No, but there's a little bit more to it than that. So they have this, this letter that's going out, and the letter is concerning itself with what they call, institutional racism or systemic racism. They're
starting to sound a lot like affirmative action type of stuff.
It is, isn't it? Okay, so here's CatholicCulture.org, and you can find it's no matter where you go, it's the same. They have the same facts about this. Okay, the letter's name is Open Wide Our Hearts. U.S. Bishops issue pastoral letter. Open Wide Our Hearts. The enduring call to love is the name of the letter.
Groan.
Yeah, exactly, right? So here's the one from America. It's the Jesuit magazine that liked misquoting or misconstruing the Pope's comments. Meeting this week in Baltimore voted overwhelmingly today to adopt and promulgate a new pastoral letter on racism, the first since 1979. It condemns the rise of anti-Semitism, anti-Muslim sentiment, and xenophobia. So, here's, for example, I haven't read the letter. I need to go do that, and I'll probably prepare some commentary on it. But just taking this as an example of some of the poor thought. What's the word I'm looking for?
Rhetoric, maybe?
The poor rigor of thought that seems to be behind so much of what the American bishops do. and again, I'm assuming that the magazine's, accurately representing it, but
Right.
anti-Muslim sentiment. Okay, so what is anti-Muslim? What if I say anti-Muslim sentiment? What would you? If I ask you, are you anti-Muslim?
I
What would
kind
you
of
say?
am.
I would say I'm anti-Muslim. I mean, Islam is a evil religion. It's a false religion, and it's a religion that has, from its very inception, has called on its adherents to persecute people into conformance. It's also a imperialist, a militantly imperialist religion. I am anti-Muslim. Every Catholic should be anti-Muslim. Every Christian should be anti-Muslim.
Is there a element of race to this religion that I wasn't aware of?
To the religion of Islam?
Right.
Oh, like maybe no. You
Why
do
is a letter about
on
racism have got anything to do with
Well,
Muslims?
I'll tell you why. It's because it's not like, and this is where I think in doing this they give up a lot of rigor of thought. But what happens is they get together and they say, "Oh, let's do a letter on racism." And, somebody goes maybe and drafts the letter, which has, a bunch of paragraphs. Every individual paragraph is debated, possibly amended, and voted on. And each paragraph individually, I think, has to be, voted on by so many bishops and approved in order to be included in the whole thing, which is then also voted on as a whole and approved. So what happens is some bishop says, "Oh, hey, while we're debating there, we should also say that anti-Semitism and anti-Muslimism is wrong." Well, I don't even think that's a word. Anti-Muslimism, I've never even heard that word.
What you'd call it.
So anyway, that's how these kinds of things get in there, and that's procedurally at least that's why they get in there. So then it talks about other topics like police brutality, the water crisis in Flint, Michigan, and so that has anything to do. Well, about the water crisis where
but
they were hiding the results of lead in the waters or whatever.
Were they trying to kill black people doing this or something?
I don't know. I don't know. What does that have to do with racism? I don't know. Okay. So here's the quote that I had intended to read. Okay, so they've got this letter. The letter aims, and this is a quote on Catholic News Agency, to combat the scourge of racism in the hearts and minds of the faithful in our own church communities and in the structure of society. According to Bishop Shelton Fabre of Huma Thibodeau, chair of the U.S. Bishops Ad Hoc Committee on Racism, blah, blah, blah. Now, here's an example. The letter follows several years of racial tensions in the U.S., and this is the reporting by the Catholic News Agency, not the bishops. Follows several years of racial tension in the U.S., sparked by incidents including police shootings of African-American men that prompted major protests in Ferguson, Montana, and Baltimore, among other parts of the country. And then here's this little paragraph in the news report. The Trump administration has engaged in strong rhetoric against undocumented immigrants and has issued stronger policies against undocumented immigrants at the border. Okay, set the letter aside and look at the news reporting. What does that have to do with a letter about racism?
Right.
Okay. Yeah.
These people are in, these people are kind of, they're supposed to be leading us to heaven. I mean,
and instead they're following.
They're so incompetent. I don't understand how. I mean, there's ignorance and not just ignorance displayed here. There's just flat out stupidity.
Yeah. Well, and
I don't know what other word for it.
There's also, I don't know how this is where, this, again, lack of rigor in thinking, they want to just grab onto, it's almost like they're millennial in their thing. It's almost like they're following the lead of millennials. Let me read you this paragraph. This is a quote from the document itself. Every racist act every such comment, every joke, every disparaging look as a reaction to the color of skin, ethnicity, or place of origin is a failure to acknowledge another person as a brother or sister created in the image of God. Now, first of all, the statement itself is patently false as a statement. But second of all, by jumping onto all of the just natural, normal human things we do, I'll give you another kind of like a parallel example. I've heard, for example, people say, they're talking about the problem of how women are treated and objectivized and undervalued in society, and how it leads to violence against women and to sexual harassment and a rape culture and stuff like that. And the same people who talk about this might say something like, yeah, how many times has, a woman been catcalled, by a passerby or something like that, as though that's even remotely on the same level.
Right.
When you try to group those things together, you undercut your credibility in trying to call out what may be a real problem. If you're the kind of person who sees a catcall as sexual harassment, especially societal, systemic sexual harassment, then you go and try to say, hey, we've got a problem we need to solve. Well, guess what? You don't get taken seriously because in your mind, you're trying to solve the problem of catcalls. Yeah. Well, I think the bishops are doing that kind of thing with this kind of, rhetoric in these pastoral letters like this. There is a real sin of racism, and it has to do with a fundamental philosophical belief that people of different races have different standings with regards to human dignity and with regards to God's favor and the availability of salvation and so on and so forth.
Right.
But the jokes, which often as not, the racial jokes are really more ethnic jokes than racial jokes, or the fact that, hey, let's face it, depending on which society you're in, you will become used to being wary of people of a certain skin color just as a natural response, just as a survivalist response to growing up in that area. And then saying, oh, because you have that response or because you told that ethnic joke, you're failing to acknowledge another person as created in the image of God. That's balderdash. Why do they have to do this kind of stuff and undercut their own credibility? And yet, in today's world, that was the safe thing to approve because people today don't actually think. They just read and feel.
I'll tell you what, more and more, I am disgusted by safety. And people who say things that are safe and never say anything unsafe, it really bothers me.
Yeah.
It just, don't be such a coward.
Right. I'm going to share something that I haven't told you. So when my wife, is a convert.
Yeah.
And she became Catholic, I think about a week before we got married. She officially became Catholic, was confirmed at Old St. Mary's Church. And so she's in the military. So we got married, and then she was stationed down in Georgia. So we went down there. And of course, she's kind of excited about being Catholic, and she would meet people who are oh, you're Catholic? I just became Catholic, and kind of like excited stuff. But she would talk to these people, and she found out that so many of these women would say, oh, that old thing about birth control, that doesn't apply anymore. The Pope changed that. You can use birth control now. Now, this is back, this is still during the pontificate of John Paul II.
Right.
So the thing is this, what she, the image that she was getting very consistently, no matter who she talked to, it seemed, other than me, it's like, it was almost like our family was the one family out of all the Catholics who actually believed what she knew the Catholic Church taught, because, I could show it to her in black and white and stuff like that. And so what she kind of developed a crisis of faith. Because what her image was becoming was, okay, here's a church that has an official belief in something, that officially teaches something, but nobody in the church is actually teaching it.
Like it's a secret or something.
Well, yeah, because I've got all these friends who clearly believe that, for example, artificial contraception is perfectly fine within marriage, and yet we've been going to Mass together how long, and I've never heard a priest say that this is a problem.
Yeah.
Not one priest. And not even mention it. So
right.
She was having a hard time understanding how the Church of Christ could be one that was so weak in proclaiming its own teachings. And, she, like I said, it was kind of an early crisis.
It'd be a hard pill to swallow.
Yeah. So it kind of providentially, I talked to our local priest about it, and when I even kind of put it to him that way, he even got a little bit, he admitted to me that he was, he felt a little bit attacked, like he wasn't doing his job.
Well, you what?
Which, in a sense, he wasn't. But he said, "Look, there's a guy coming. He's doing one of these missions. I don't know if you've seen. I've only seen a couple of missions where, like, a traveling priest comes around to a parish and spends 3 or 4 nights giving a big speech to everybody. Kind of.
I've never been to any of those.
So this guy, Father Daniel McCaffrey, was coming to do this mission. And the father down in Georgia said, "Hey, I want you to go talk to this guy. I think you'll benefit from talking to him." So we went and talked to him. We kind of explained to him. And he said, "Oh yeah, the reason that you don't hear priests preaching about it is because if they do, the money walks."
Yep.
And in fact, this priest, Father McCaffrey, he said, "This is actually my last mission circuit." He said, "After this, I'm going to go work full-time for the Paul VI Institute, which is dedicated to promoting the teachings of Humanae Vitae within the church." So, he could see it.
I tell you what, I never hear any priest in Cincinnati talk about it, except, and I have not been to every single Mass, so
sure.
There's probably plenty who do,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't want to say anything bad here about priests in Cincinnati, but I never hear it except for St. Lawrence, which is in a pretty poor area, a very poor area.
Yeah.
And even though it's a giant church, Father Watkins, he says something about...
He doesn't pull punches on anything.
No. He says something about contraception almost every other Mass.
Mm-hmm.
And, boy, is his church crowded.
Yeah, it is. And people are traveling to come to his Masses.
Yeah, people who move out of the neighborhood and say go, an hour away will still come back to his Mass.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, the 20-minute Mass doesn't...
That kind of helped. What do we call it? The microwave Mass?
Yeah. We used to call that... They had Westerhoff there, and they called him Chet the Jet.
Chet, that's right.
And then Watkins took over. He does just... But it's not just that Mass, though.
No. Well, the thing is... it's not just the Mass, but the thing is, his Masses are short not because he rushes. It's because he doesn't do rigmarole.
Yeah.
That so many other parishes do. He gets about the business of the Mass.
Right. And you wouldn't... The thing is, I've seen other Mass... Well, you referred to them once as underwater Masses.
Oh, right.
And I've been to an awful lot of them, especially in Harrison.
Mm-hmm.
It's painfully prolonged.
Yeah.
Like no one's allowed to walk faster than a certain pace. And
Mm-hmm.
you're not allowed... the people who read are not allowed to read faster than a certain pace. And as slow as they're taking everything, I don't think it's even half as solemn as one of Father Watkins' masses.
Exactly. That's the thing. His mass has that sense of, this is the thing we're here for. And these others don't have that sense.
Right. Even though they take an hour and a half long, and it's just ugh.
Right. Okay, so anyway, but the bigger point is, yes, his masses, had we gone to a few of those, perhaps my wife wouldn't have had this crisis of faith. But, the fact is, no priest had been talking about. Now, talking to Father McCaffrey and him giving us a good sense of what's going on among the bishops, he said that there are priests who had wanted to talk about contraception and had been told by their bishops, don't talk about that. Wow. I don't want the money leaving my diocese. Yes. I mean, to me, this should have been blown open as a scandal back in the 90s, but it wasn't.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, this is scandalous. So, and when you think about what Jesus said about those who cause scandal, every bishop out there should be worried. So anyway, pretty much since then, we really haven't heard priests talk about contraception.
No.
Except for once in a while, the priest at Holy Rosary downtown Indianapolis would. That's a place where they do
They do the Tridentine Mass there, don't
they do have the Tridentine Mass, but even their masses in the new form are a lot more solemn and traditional. It's they try to include chant and Latin and that kind of stuff. So it's not quite the full Latin Mass at Old St. Mary's, but it tends towards that more traditional way. But the one notable exception is there was a priest, Father Murphy. He was an associate priest at the St. Maximilian Kolbe Church that I think Jason is going to now up in Westchester.
Yeah.
And he since then had been relocated. He had been moved out to what's another city at, like Middletown or Middleton or something like that?
There's Middletown is up
Middletown.
north.
Yeah, Middletown. He had been moved to some church in Middletown, and I never followed up to find him, and I actually would like to find him. But our very first time going to Mass at St. Maximilian Kolbe, he was saying Mass, and it was, St. Maximilian Kolbe is one of these like super church type churches.
Yeah.
And it feels that way. And the way the priest says Mass, it's almost like the priest isn't saying Mass. It's more like the way the production crew produces Mass and the priest is just one of the players.
Right.
But the way they do Mass is like that. But this particular priest, in his sermon, very much to his credit, called out that the use of contraception, of artificial contraception in marriages, is one of the biggest evils today. Said it. And he said it's one of the biggest things that is causing the downfall of the family and marriages in America. Well, okay, hearing one sermon that said that could have prevented a lot of, anguish on my wife's part early in our marriage. Again, it wasn't that she had a hard time accepting the church's teaching. She full-heartedly accepted it, but it's like, why doesn't anyone else?
Right.
So now, that's just an example of, kind of the ongoing crisis of the American bishops, and who knows, maybe the bishops around the world. I don't know. I can only speak to America. But the American bishops just not having the courage to say what needs to be said. They're going to take the safe path. They're going to take the path that doesn't cause the money to walk. They're going to take the path that doesn't cause the Catholic numbers. Do they get some kind of pat on the back from the Pope if their Catholic numbers are up or something?
I don't think so, because the church has been shrinking steadily for a long time now.
Well, they act like that's the thing. They go so safe. They act like they're going to get something for these numbers, and in doing so, they lose the numbers.
Yeah.
So I don't know. That's my
frustrating.
That's my take so far on things out of the meeting last week of the USCCB.
Yeah, I don't think you'll get much more out of it.
Yeah.
I mean,
well, it's over. That's what it is what it is.
It's a sign of what's going on, and that's all there is to it.
Yeah. So
okay.
We'll see.
In other news, Stan Lee died.
Yeah.
Marvel Comics Stan Lee. He's the creator of Spider-Man, right?
Spider-Man, yeah. And a whole bunch of comics. He especially.
Do you ever read those?
I never read the old comics, no. But he was. I think he liked heroes and villains with alliteration.
Yeah. I never read comic books, so I don't. It's not a big deal to me, but
most of my knowledge.
It's a big deal for some people.
Most of my knowledge of Stan Lee is either from my kids talking about him because they got into comics as a collector's thing for a little while, or from when they talk about him on The Big Bang Theory.
Yeah.
California.
Yeah.
76.
It's the deadliest wildfire
so far. 76 discovered dead so far. That's the current number.
No.
And then there's...
No.
Is 40, it higher?
Well, I took Pulse at, the beginning of this week, and it was 42 confirmed dead. Yep. 228 missing.
You said
later 76.
In the week, 76 confirmed
76,
dead.
Okay.
And at one time during the week, I don't know where the number stands now, but at one time during the week, it was up to 1,000 unaccounted people.
Wow.
Yeah.
I think the Wall Street Journal had an article about the fact that Trump is right on the money on this when he talks about the fact that they're so mismanaged, and that's why these wildfires are so bad.
Yeah. Well, and Trump, I mean, he made a statement of, talking to some of the wildlife managers, and what was the other? There was a particular country that he had referred to, and he said that they, they go out and they manage their forests, and here's the thing, he used the word rake. They rake the ground.
Yeah.
Kind of creating this impression, if everybody goes out and rakes the ground a little bit, that's going to stop forest fires. But he really wasn't saying that.
No.
The point is, he was saying that going out, if you're going to not allow the fires to, if you're not going to allow controlled burns in order to use up the biomass that becomes fuel for these big fires, if you're not going to use it up in controlled burns, you have to go get it out of the woods and get rid of it somehow. Because that's what allows the fires to become these massive events. And that's what he was saying. In this other country, they said, yeah, we do that. We take our money. That's one of the things we do spend tax money on, and we go out and we make sure that, that we're not going to have this problem. And that's what Trump was saying. He was saying, hey, there's ways to do it. Here's the way this other country does it. We can do the same thing.
There's a lot of things we could do. One of them is harvesting the trees.
That's true.
Then the fire wouldn't destroy them.
Mm-hmm. And the thing is, we wouldn't have to depopulate the forest.
Right.
To harvest. We wouldn't have to deforest the area.
You do it in treks.
Yeah, or...
So that you've got sections blocked off. And, we're not going to cut this section, but we can create a space between these two large forests.
Well, you could do that. That would be one thing. But even within the large forests, I mean, you can...
you thin it out a little bit.
You could thin it, exactly. You could say, okay, we're gonna, the fallen trees, if we can find recently fallen trees, maybe we can actually get some good wood out of those. But other than that, we can take one in every 50 trees from this area and select which ones, or whatever it is. But the thing is, allowing a certain amount of harvesting with, responsible oversight, and working to clear some of the biofuel that fuels these fires. Yes, it's work. Yes, it takes money. But, given the amount of damage these fires are causing, seems to me like it would be money well spent.
Yeah, but it's California.
It is California.
All right. CNN. Well, Jim Acosta was kicked out of the White House.
For being a jerk over and over again.
Yeah, but it's... I don't understand. There's a federal judge out of the blue says you have to let him in the White House.
Yeah,
I mean, what if I wanted to go to the White House? I have a podcast, therefore I'm a journalist.
You're part of the press. That's right. That's right.
They didn't even kick out CNN. Just him.
Just him. Just that one guy. Right. It's not like and it's not like they got rid of. It is. It is. It's absolutely insane.
If I were Trump, I would just say, all right, he can come, and then not show up for the press briefing. And tell, what's her name? No, just don't go. Or just stand there and don't say anything.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I would do.
Yeah.
But, I don't know. We'll see what he does. I'm sure it's not going to sit at that.
Yeah. There'll be more to come.
Something will happen. We'll see. Let's see. NASA discovered they call it a super Earth exoplanet.
Okay, exoplanet is a planet circling a star outside, other than our sun, right?
Right. Bernard star specifically. I don't know where that is. It's the fourth nearest known individual star to the sun.
Oh, okay.
So it's a super. It's like 5 times the mass of Earth, but it's a solid planet. Most big planets are gas. This one's a solid planet.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of neat.
Okay, so a super Earth exoplanet spotted around nearby Bernard's star. Okay.
Yeah. So, of course, we would never be able to be on that planet because we'd be crushed. But
well, not only that, apparently it's frigid alien. It says it's frigid, about 3.2 times more massive than Earth, and Bernard's star is a red dwarf.
Oh, I didn't know.
So I guess a red dwarf means it's already gone through its red giant stage.
Yeah. So it's cold, but
right. But it's cool.
But there could be internal heat.
Oh, yeah.
Which is what happens with some of the moons close to like Jupiter and Saturn.
Mm-hmm.
So there could be something going on there.
Right.
I don't know.
Right.
All right. Bernie Sanders proposes the Stop Walmart Act. Hold on. Minnie, stop.
The Stop
I'll start over.
Walmart. Okay.
Bernie Sanders proposes the Stop Walmart Act.
And what is that? I haven't read about this one.
This would prohibit big employers like Walmart from repurchasing shares unless they adopt a $15 an hour minimum wage.
From repurchasing shares from whom?
Their own shares. So a large company would want to maintain control over their own company, so they repurchase shares. Well, a CEO would want to own as many shares as he could.
Okay, so he
can't buy shares because he's an employee until the company adopts a $15 an hour minimum wage.
So is this something?
The whole thing is stupid.
It is stupid. Is it something he proposes would only apply to officers of the corporations?
Yeah, you know what? I don't know.
Because then, like an employee of Walmart, like if I'm a checkout,
sometimes
clerk, I might want to buy
part
Walmart
of their. Sometimes that's part of their pay.
Yeah,
they get what do they call that?
Pay in stocks, or they get options.
Yeah,
stock options.
Yeah, stock options, things like that.
Right.
I don't know.
Oh, well.
I might be reading it wrong, But he's just stupid.
This wouldn't be the first time that he showed himself to be a kook.
Between him and Acosta, not Acosta, who's the girl in New York? Or was it New Jersey? Acostia.
Oh, the other socialist?
Yeah.
The one that was saying no company should be allowed to make more than $1 billion without being taken over by the government or something like that. I mean, I'm simplifying, somewhat pejoratively simplifying her proposal, but it was something along those lines.
It's just silly, and they show how little they know about business, about finance, and about America, really.
Yeah.
So, the ice storm that hit the whole eastern side here. It looks like 8 people died.
Oh, wow. I didn't know people died from it.
Yeah. I don't know how they died.
So did this like collect, I don't want to say collect power, because like when you talk about a tropical storm, you can talk about it collecting energy as it moves along and you know.
Yeah.
But did this get worse as it went eastward and progressed? Because it's the same storm that hit us and you.
Yeah, but ours was a lot worse than it was you.
Yeah.
And wait a minute. I went to Indianapolis that day. You guys didn't get hardly anything.
Well, that's what I was saying. I mean, I went out, there was an 1/8 inch of ice crusted on my car, and I got in it, and I drove slowly through the neighborhood, and then I drove to work, and that was it.
So now, 2 hours away, we got nothing almost.
Now, there were power outages. There were a few lines that were taken down in some of the older areas where they have a lot of overhead lines and stuff like that. Nothing like Cincinnati. I went on the maps, the IPL map for Indianapolis versus Duke Energy map for Cincinnati, and it was like, I don't know, it seemed like hundreds of times as many outage areas in Cincinnati as there were in Indianapolis.
Yeah, I don't know. And I mean, was it worse east of us? I guess it was. Yeah. I mean, we didn't get hit that hard. Mm-hmm. But it was enough to put the power out throughout a lot of parts of the city.
Yeah.
But I think east of us, it was even worse. It must have been losing energy as it progressed east or west.
Mm-hmm.
Is that which way it traveled?
No, it went west to east. It hit us before you.
Really?
Yes. In fact, it actually, that same storm system, I think, actually dropped a little bit of snow, get this, in Oklahoma before heading up here.
Okay. Well, I don't know what I don't know what happened there. I just know I think 2 hours difference made a huge there was a change.
I think it picked up violence or picked up moisture or something as it went eastward and was causing more havoc.
I guess so. And Andrew Gillum finally conceded to Ron DeSantis in Florida.
In Florida, yep, finally.
So that's finally over with. I think there are a couple other recounts still going on, but hopefully the right thing happens.
Yeah.
And that's all I got.
Yep, I think that's about it. I mean, you know, our big current events topic was in right here in the church. So but that's hopefully Florida gets their election process figured out. They seem to consistently, they were the ones.
I think this is all about 2020.
Oh yeah, could be.
I think this is all about trying to figure out how to steal the votes in 2020 when we re-elect Trump.
So they're saying, okay, let's try to come up with
some trials
systems
now
to do this, and let's go ahead and try them now, and learn from our mistakes.
If we can get it to a hand count, and we can make sure it becomes a hand count, which is when they can actually mess with the votes,
right?
Then we can, no matter what happens in 2020, Florida will be a blue state. Oh, well. I guess we'll see what happens.
Yep.
All right. Well.
Okay.
Thanks for listening.
I think that's a wrap.
Think about what we said, and we'll talk to you next week here on a podcast about Catholic things.
Bye, everyone.